Hey everybody and welcome back to the channel, and today we are talking about VCT Masters Tokyo and doing my pick'ems and predictions for the group stage. Now in case you don't know, the top seeds of every league are already in the playoff stage awaiting the winners of this group stage. These are the lower seeds of each league. There are 8 teams total in this group stage. There are 2 groups. This is Group A that you're looking at right now, and we're going to predict who we think is going to win. So the very first match that we have on the board is Energy versus Navi. This is an absolutely stacked match to start off the group stage. I think this is going to be a very, very close one. Energy being the team that was the Optic roster last year, but with the new additions of Som and Artis, this will be the first time Artis is playing against his former team. Last year, Artis was on FPX, and that roster did the same thing that Optic did, and just had most of the players go to a different team, and that was Navi. So it has the old FPX roster, just with the addition of CNED instead of Artis, which personally I think is an upgrade. I think CNED is a better player than Artis. Artis having a lot of inconsistencies this year, looking really good at times and looking very mediocre at others, while Som replacing Marv as the controller role and playing pretty well in it. He's a very good anchor controller. Som gets a surprisingly large amount of kills for a controller player, so I think he's really stepped up his game since being picked to stay on Energy's roster for the franchise league. So I think this is a really close one. This is the number 2 seed in the Americas with Energy versus the number 4 seed in EMEA, being Navi. Navi having kind of a rough playoffs, not looking as good as you maybe think. Losing to Team Liquid in their very first match and then winning against Giants, but then losing 2-0 to Foot Esports, a team that they probably should have beat realistically, but is doing some pretty good work, honestly. And it's a similar story with Energy losing their first match against Evil Geniuses. They had to run through the lower bracket to make it to the grand finals of the Americas playoffs, beating Evil Geniuses 3-1 and then losing to Loud 3-0. Those teams are just destined to play against each other, I swear to God. But overall, I think this is a very close match and 2 teams that I think maybe should look better than they have so far, but I think Energy is coming in with a decent amount of momentum. Yes, they did lose 3-0 to Loud, but Loud's one of the best teams in the world, if not the best, so. But I just think with Navi kind of looking a little bit mediocre during playoffs, I think they're starting to show a little bit of cracks, while Energy, I think, really picked up their game. I know people in the comments are probably going to be like, oh, typical North American fan, but I'm going to pick Energy. Again, I see this as a very close match. Navi could definitely take this, but I just think Energy is going to be really motivated to make it to the playoff stage, and I think they're going to have a lot to prove in this tournament, and I think they're going to do a pretty good job. Next up, we have Edward Gaming versus T1. Edward Gaming being one of the Chinese teams that was invited to this tournament by going through a tournament in China, which allowed 2 Chinese teams to make it here, while T1 being the number 3 seed in the Pacific League. Now, while I don't know a ton about Edward Gaming, and they did have some decent performances in international tournaments in the past, but overall they haven't been facing the same level of competition that the rest of these teams have been facing. So while they may be able to surprise some people, I just don't really see them beating T1. I think T1 is a roster that has a lot of potential to go far. I think they definitely have some cracks, like their map pool isn't as deep as you would want it to be, but T1 has players like Saya Player who played very well during the regular season and during playoffs. So I just think overall T1 has the upper hand on them. Next up, we have Navi versus Edward Gaming in the lower bracket. As I said, I don't know a ton about Edward Gaming, but what I do know is that Navi is a very good team, and I think they're going to be able to beat Edward Gaming. Again, maybe Edward Gaming surprises me and a lot of other people, but I just personally don't see the Chinese teams going very far. I kind of hope I'm wrong, because that'd be kind of funny, and it'd be a very interesting turn of events to have teams that weren't in the regular leagues be able to go far in the tournament, but I don't expect that to happen, and I expect Navi to be able to beat this team. And back to the upper bracket, we have Energy versus T1. This one is another very tight one. Energy has quite the bracket to go through, honestly. This is the 2nd seed in the Americas versus the number 3 seed in Pacific. As I said, I do think T1 has a very good roster that can absolutely go far, but I also think that Energy's experience and their deep map pool is going to be able to triumph T1's, and I just think that Energy is going to be able to be clutch in a match like this. I think they really want to get to playoffs. As I said, it's hard to see Energy not making playoffs. So while I do think T1 actually does have a pretty good chance against Energy, and I think it ends up being very close, and I think it ends up being like a 2-1 match, I just don't see it in terms of T1 winning. I am picking Energy for this one to qualify for the playoff stage. Next up, we have T1 versus Navi. Now, this is a pretty interesting matchup. Again, the number 3 seed in the Pacific League versus the number 4 seed in the EMEA. And I think overall, if you ask most people, you would say that Navi is probably the favorite to win this one. But I do think T1 can surprise a lot of people and be able to qualify. It's hard to see Navi not making the playoff stage with the roster that they had, with the year that roster had last last year, winning an international tournament in Copenhagen and then placing very well at Champions as well. They're a really good team, but I just think they look a little bit shaky right now. And I do kind of have the opinion that T1 is actually going to be able to upset Navi and qualify for playoffs. I do think this is going to be a very good tournament for Pacific teams, and Navi, I just don't know if they have it right now. I think if they qualify for Champions, they'll be able to make a pretty good comeback, but I just don't really see it for Navi right now, and I think T1 is going to have some surprises. So that is Group A. Those are my predictions for who will qualify for playoffs in that group, T1 and Energy. Now we move on to Group B, and the first match that we're talking about is DRX versus AttackingSoul Esports. DRX being the number 2 seed in Pacific League after losing to Paper Rex in the grand finals of their league playoffs. A kind of surprising win from Paper Rex there. I thought DRX would have had that, but Paper Rex looked very, very good in those playoffs, so I don't really blame them. But DRX is a very good team. They won 8-1 during the regular season. They were top of the Pacific League during the regular season. And AttackingSoul Esports being the other Chinese team. Again, I don't know too much about this roster, and I do hope that that's a good match, but I think DRX is really going to be motivated in this tournament. It's the first international tournament on a Pacific League area, while DRX is a Korean team, and this is in Japan, obviously. I just think that Pacific teams are really going to have a good run because it is their home turf, kind of, in terms of continents at the very least. And DRX is just an extremely good team. I think they're one of the best teams in the world, and I just don't see them losing to a Chinese team that hasn't been against the same level of competition, but I could be wrong, and we could see a pretty insane upset, honestly. But I just don't see it happening, and I think DRX will move on. Next up, we have FUT Esports versus Evil Geniuses. Now, this is one of the more interesting matchups in the group stage to me. Both these teams kind of surprising people and doing very well in their league playoffs. FUT Esports upsetting Navi to take the number 3 seed in EMEA. Weren't able to beat Team Liquid to take the number 3 spot, but they did do very well in those playoffs. And Evil Geniuses is a very similar story. They beat some teams in their league playoffs that people didn't expect them to, such as Energy and Cloud9, taking out 2 of the top 3 teams in the Americas League, so very impressive work from them. And if you asked me a couple days ago who I think takes this, I honestly probably would have said FUT because Evil Geniuses was going to be missing Demon 1. Demon 1 being their best player during the regular season, pretty much dragging them to a playoff spot. And it seemed like he wasn't going to be able to join Evil Geniuses in Tokyo because of visa issues, but the team figured it out, and he will be attending the tournament. So I think that absolutely changes things, and I do think that that absolutely can put EG over the top against FUT, but you definitely can't underrate FUT with the performances that they had during the regular season and playoffs. They're a very solid Turkish team, and they play a lot differently than North American teams, so I think Evil Geniuses is going to have a tough one for this. This is a very close one for me, but I think I'm going to take FUT for this one. I think that Evil Geniuses can absolutely take this one, but I think maybe they stumble a bit against European teams. They haven't had that international experience so far. I think there's only a couple players on their team that have been to international tournaments, Ethan being one of them. And I just think that FUT is going to be able to surprise them with how well they can play. Next up, we have AttackingSoul Esports versus Evil Geniuses. And I feel kind of bad just picking both China teams to lose both of their matches, but I don't see Evil Geniuses losing to them. You can maybe make the argument that China has a really deep talent pool. I don't know much about the China region. They're not in the franchise VCT, which is mainly what I pay attention to, but I just don't really see them going far when they haven't been against the same competition, and I think teams are going to be able to figure them out. Next up, we have DRX versus FUT Esports. I'm sorry, FUT, I'm picking DRX for this one. I'm not going to mess around too much. I think DRX is one of the best teams in the world. They are due for an international tournament win. I don't see them not making playoffs. I think FUT's a good team. Maybe they surprise them, but I just think DRX takes this one hand in hand. Either 2-0 or 2-1. Maybe FUT can make it close, but I just think DRX just steamrolls to playoffs. And then we have the rematch, FUT Esports versus Evil Geniuses. Maybe Evil Geniuses gets a little more comfortable coming into this one, now having the experience of playing in an international match. And my heart says I want to pick Evil Geniuses, but my head kind of says FUT is going to be able to beat them again. While Evil Geniuses is absolutely capable of some pretty insane upsets as we've seen them do, are they capable of going on a deep run in an international tournament? I don't know. I think FUT is going to be able to take this one. I don't see both EMEA teams in the group stage not making it. I'm picking Navi to not make it, which I think is kind of bold. I think Navi are very good, and I'm probably going to eat my words for that one. But this is what I'm picking. These are my predictions, and they're just predictions, so you can absolutely disagree with me on these ones. And I hope Evil Geniuses is able to make it. I love their story so far this year, but I think EMEA is going to do pretty well. So those are my pick'ems and predictions. Let me know what you think of them in the comment section below and who you think is going to do well in this group stage. And before I go, I just want to say a little quick word. Obviously, most of the Valorant community at this point has heard the news about Twistin, and I made a post on this channel a couple days ago when it happened, just saying, you know, hope everyone's okay. Please take care of yourselves. Mental health is extremely important, especially in esports. You know, this is competition. You know, like sports players go through tons of stuff all the time. Esports players as well. You know, like you have the internet. You're under a microscope. You know, everyone's watching you, and if you play poorly, then everyone's just crapping on you. So I just want to kind of say, I just want everyone to be kind to each other. There's no place for negativity. There's no place for, you know, treating these people like garbage. I don't have a lot of problems with like trash talk or anything, but I just think overall we need to be kind to each other and just keep that in mind, that these are people. These are just players. These are just people that are just doing their job. And whether they do well or not isn't really up to us, and doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. And what really matters is how we treat each other and just being good people and looking out for those that you care about. And I just hope everyone stays safe. And if you ever have similar thoughts to obviously what Twistin was going through, please, please, please go get help. There's always another way. If you're young and you're depressed, there's so much life ahead of you. If you're like a teenager and you want to take your own life, just remember, you're young, you can overcome it. You can have a great life if you just focus on yourself and you get the help that you need. There's always someone that loves you. There's always another way. There's always a better way to do things. So just try to keep that in mind if you ever get to a place like that. And yeah, sorry to end on a little sad note there, but I just felt it would have been weird to just not mention the Twistin stuff at all. So thank you all for watching, and I hope you're all okay. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe what you think of the Masters Tokyo group stage, and see you guys in the next one. Bye.